Hey there, I'm David Donnan, and I want to make a video reacting to a recent article that came out by a gentleman named Chris Ritter. Chris is a blogger at peopleneedjesus.net. You can find his stuff at peopleneedjesus.net, and he wrote an article for another magazine, an online magazine, Firebrand, which you can find at firebrandmag.com. But he's talking about the future of the United Methodist Church, and I thought it was interesting. There's been a few articles that have come out recently about what's going to happen to the future of the denomination, and there were some interesting things in this article that I wanted to pass along for church people who maybe they don't follow all the bloggers and what's happening. But this article is called "Moving Ahead in the United Methodist Church, a Distributed General Conference," and I made a few highlights that I wanted to share with you. He gives a little bit of background about what happened in 2019. There was a called General Conference to settle our division on human sexuality, and although the traditional Christian understanding of marriage and human sexuality was upheld, a firestorm of protests erupted in North America and Western Europe. There were several pastors who said, "We don't care what the church's teaching has been. We see this as a justice issue, so we're going to disobey the set rules." And so there was a big firestorm of, well, what are we going to do? We have these rules we've agreed upon, but there's certain people who feel called to violate these rules. So what are we going to do? So there was a famous negotiator, Kenneth Feinberg. He was probably most famous for after September 11th, he worked with I think it was the government fund and helped negotiate and distribute the benefits for that. And so he volunteered to help the United Methodist Church find a way forward. The plan was pretty much U.S. traditionalists agreed to form a new global denomination if they passed the legislation that Mr. Feinberg helped them come up with, and it would grant them liberty from the legal trust clause that ties congregational properties to the UMC. If you're part of a different church or even a business, you would just say, okay, well, just take your property and leave if there's a dispute with the organization you're a part of. But in the United Methodist churches, all the properties are not actually owned by the local churches. They are held in trust, which means the actual annual conferences make up all the churches in their area are actually the owners of the properties. I think I'm saying that and explaining that right. So we were going to get together and try to pass this legislation that would let people leave and kind of figure out what to do with the property and what to do with pensions is another kind of sticking point. But of course, the pandemic happened, and just recently, the Biden administration said, we're going to keep certain travel restrictions that will make it really hard for the United Methodist Church to come together because we are a global church. There are 862 delegates that are supposed to come to a meeting to decide the future of the denomination, and a lot of them are from different parts of the United States. So you can imagine the logistics just to get visas to get people here during normal times. And so there's going to be a lot of complications to figuring out if we can even get together. So Chris says, is there a technological solution? He talks about there's a team made to study. Can we get together virtually? And he points out United Methodist delegates, however, do not have the same access to technology enjoyed in the United States. And even in the United States, there's churches and areas where there's just satellite internet, which of course can be spotty. He talks about how there's also some translation difficulties. Says that we translate into French, German, Korean, Mandarin, Chinese, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, Swahili, and American Sign Language. And that all happens live as General Conference is happening, as they're making motions, as they're voting and debating. It has to be translated. So it's a very complex process. He also says we need to make sure that we have a secure voting process, which, how could you do that virtually? And so his solution is a distributed general conference. He says a distributed general conference, these delegates would gather as groups in regional locations where reliable connectivity could be secured. So you would go, we do that at our church too. Sometimes we'll have meetings where it'll have to be on Zoom because of what's going on in our community. And so we'll have a couple people who don't have computers or computer access come up to the church. So it'll be me and one or two other people up here, and then everybody else joining virtually. And so it sounds like he's proposing something along those lines. He also acknowledges that there's a trust deficit in our denomination. Now, if you come to my church, we all trust and love each other. We don't always agree. But once you get higher and you're around people that you're not around except every 4 years, and you're kind of opposing on certain issues, there can be some trust issues and some sneaky things that happen legislatively. You can read about that in his article if you want to. But he also points out another one of the challenges is that United Methodist evangelicals in America are more motivated towards separation than the traditionalists in Africa. So while we do have, the traditionalists would say, we've got more votes, we can go ahead and pass this. Well, not all the traditionalists say, like, this is a big enough issue for us to split over, because in certain parts of the world, this isn't really debated. It's more of an issue here in the United States. So he thinks we might dare to hope that we could have this online, virtual, distributed general conference to approve a small raft of motions that will allow for orderly division and keep the UMC operational. And then he talks about how there's an International Transitional Leadership Council that's been working to prepare a transitional book of discipline to govern congregations and clergy who will be leaving. And then this is what I think is kind of the big takeaway. A convening conference for a new denomination is envisioned for late 2022 or 2023. The delay is to allow time for annual conferences and congregations to hold the votes enabled by the separation protocol. So I would think one of the hopes for traditionalist annual conferences is that they can just vote at annual conference. If the denomination splits, we'll all vote to go to stay in the conference or to go ahead and go. And that way they're thinking about having their organizing conference after all the local annual conferences have done that. And just for reference, my church, Twin City United Methodist, is in the South Georgia Annual Conference, so we would get together and all vote on that. He says uncertainty has become par for the course in United Methodism, and it's now in the hands of this Commission on General Conference to decide whether a virtual and distributed general conference matches the needs of this moment. So yeah, a lot is up in the air about what will happen with general conference and what will happen in the future of the church. My advice to you is to just patiently wait. Enjoy the parts of church that are fun. It's serving in your local church. It's growing closer to God. And you know, if you're a church leader or you're a pastor, you know, we got to follow this stuff and it's important. But ultimately, it's going to be what we do in our local churches that has the biggest impact. And, you know, we just got to follow this and hope for the best, and who knows even what the best is at this point. If you want more information from me or you have some comments, you can leave them in the comments section. If you want more videos like this, let me know. You can follow Chris again at peopleneedjesus.net or follow firebrandmag.com, and you can find me at daviddowning.com. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. Hope you have a great day.